So adjacent angles are simply angles that are kind of next to each other is really what it comes down to. And so they're next to each other, but they have to kind of share a side. And of course, if they're butted right up against each other, they're going to share a side. They also technically have to share the same vertex. They have to start at the same point. So there's a little bit of sharing involved. But again, the idea is next to each other. You can't have one angle inside the other. And so when you look at something like this, these are adjacent angles. Angle 1 is adjacent, which I'll abbreviate, to angle 2. All right, and we can see they share this side. They have this side in the middle in common. They share that one, and they're next to each other. Okay, angle 1 is separate from angle 2, except for that side they share. Okay, they don't share any stuff in between the two rays that make the angle. Okay, so they have to be next to each other, one right beside the other, but they share that side. Okay, and they have to start at the same spot. Like if I drew it like this, if I had angle 1 like this, and then angle 2 like this, that's no good, okay? These are not adjacent angles because they don't start at the same spot. So they have to start at the same spot. They have to be right next to each other, butted right up against each other, and share that side, okay? And notice they don't share that entire ray, and that's the problem, okay? They have to completely share that ray, so they have to start at the same spot, okay? The next one, same kind of thing. We can see that they start at the same spot. One angle is right next to the other angle, and they share one of those sides, so these are adjacent angles. So angle 3 is adjacent to angle 4, okay? Or I could say angle 4 is adjacent to angle 3, okay? These are adjacent angles, all right? And again, it just means that they're right up against each other. They share that side. They start at the same point, okay? But again, it's next to, not inside of, all right? They have to be next to each other. For example, if I look at something like these guys, it says name a pair of adjacent angles. So any pair of adjacent angles here, all right? And so as I look at this thing, there's a bunch of different versions of this I could write. I could say, let me start with something like BFA. If I did BFA, I could say an adjacent angle to BFA would be something like BFC. Oh, missed my angle symbol. Okay, and these are adjacent angles because once again, if I were to kind of trace this, here's the first one that I listed. And now here's the second one that I listed. They share this side, and look at that, right next to each other. Okay. For BFA, I could have also said something like BFD. That would have been an adjacent angle. Again, because they're next to each other, they share that side. Okay, and so there's lots of different versions of this thing that I could come up with, using the same angles even. So using that BFA, I could say something like angle B. Again, I forgot my angle symbol. Get your head in the game, Mr. Jansen. Angle BFD. Okay, and again, it's the same kind of thing here. If I were to kind of trace this guy, there's BFA, well, BFD, so BFD is this angle right here. Notice they're right next to each other. They share that side of ray FB, and so that makes them adjacent angles, okay? And so there's lots of other examples you could have here. You could have EFA with AFB. You could have EFA with EFD, all right? You could have CFD with DFE, all right? There's all kinds of options here as long as they're next to each other, one right next to the other, and they share that side, okay? Looking at something like the next guy, it's asking, is BFD adjacent to CFD? And this is where students tend to get a little bit confused. So let me trace each of these. BFD, so here's BFD. Okay, that's this angle that I just traced in purple. And then CFD, all right, CFD, I'll trace that one in red. And so I look at these two angles. The question is, I can see that they share a side right down here. They share this side, FD. But the question is, are they next to each other? And the answer is no, they're not next to each other. CFD is literally inside of angle BFD, okay? And so these aren't adjacent because they're not next to each other. It's not one next to the other. It's one inside of the other, all right? And so the idea here is adjacent angles, they don't share anything but that one side. So I can't have one angle inside the other, all right? I need the angles next to each other. All right? And so no, these are not adjacent angles because one is inside of the other angle, okay? They're not adjacent because they're not next to each other. They're not next to each other. One angle is inside of the other angle. Okay? And so again, adjacent angles, they have to be next to each other. They share only that side, all right? But they can't be inside of one another. It's got to be next to each other, okay?